The knowledge to nurture at skillforkids.com.
So welcome to the skillforkids.com. We've got the advanced skill building and coordination activities tutorial for you today. And this comes about through thinking about how we can try and do a better job at developing kids' skills. All right? We can start with what we ultimately want kids to be able to do in skill-based sports. That is an ability to adapt their skills to different and changing environments, which is hugely important in any kind of competition, and an accelerated ability to learn. And the kids who have that accelerated ability to learn are the ones that end up really good. So if we look currently kind of where the sports development process sits, we've got initially very, very young kids, toddlers, young kids, they become active. Then through that physical activity, they start to develop some fundamental perceptual motor skills like catching, kicking, throwing, punting, striking. Now, for another tutorial, this has to happen a lot better as well. But we'll leave that for now, but we'll go on to the kids sampling sport. So we want this to happen a lot better, but we're really dealing with kind of from here down. So kids then start to sample their sports. All right? And then they start to learn a sport or some sports that they're probably developing an interest in. At that stage, what they then start to do is start to really just develop their sport-specific skills. All right? Once they start to develop their sport-specific skills, they start to do more training, they do more play, and they do more competition in it. And that's kind of where it sits in terms of the way kids develop in sport. And that's absolutely required. That's what we need to do. We can't discount obviously how important it is for sport-specific skills and everything to develop. But what I'm proposing is that we need to try and add something else in there, particularly with the younger kids. All right? And what we can add in there is these advanced kind of skills and coordination activities to really develop high levels of coordination, high levels of body awareness, right, and high levels of their kids' ability to adapt to just varying situations. Say, for example, where any type of ball-related activity or movement-related activity. So how can we get these kids, all right, to develop and having a heightened ability to adapt to different situations and have that accelerated ability to learn, both these types of activities, but also their sport-specific skills. So we want to try and add in from this point, and really that's probably from about 7 years onwards, so kids are sampling sports from around kind of that age, all right? And we just don't want to just have them just doing the sport-specific skills. We want to try and get them doing more of these overall coordination and body awareness type activities. Okay, so we've just spoken about how we can kind of add this type of stuff into our sports development process. So, increasingly difficult advanced skill building and coordination activities. So how do we go about providing these activities and these experiences for kids through these years? So I've got 5 points here, 5 different things you can concentrate or 5 different things you can use to manipulate activities and try and develop lots of new challenges and ongoingly difficult challenges. The first one is just to manipulate variables. All right, so by manipulating variables of time, first of all, right, so we can require that they do something quicker, or for a catching exercise, for example, we could throw the ball quicker so they've got to move quicker to the ball, or we could throw it at them quicker so that they've actually got to react quicker and catch quicker with their hand. Or that could be the same with any kind of kicking, punting or striking type thing. Or say with movement. Movement, we could require them to move quicker, which is related to the time, but we can also then challenge them to move in increasingly difficult ways with different patterns of movement. We could get them to hop doing something, we could get them to jump in different ways, we could get them to jump and rotate and also do something. All right, so there's lots of different ways we can manipulate these variables in any simple activity to make it more difficult and then give the kids something that they've got to then learn to adapt to. All right, a new challenge they've got to then concentrate on, hey, I've got to figure out how to do that, and they adapt their body, adapt their skills. What they're also doing is actually learning how they can get better at things. All right? So the next one is just combining skills. So we might have kids who can do some kind of, they're doing a kicking type activity, but we could add something else in there and get them to perform a series of skills. So they've got to adapt one part of their body while they're doing a skill and then adapt their foot for a kicking and then adapt their body to move in a different way. So you do a combination of skills jump, sprint, catch, throw, kick, or something like that, so that they've got to adapt their body continually. The next thing you can do, and this is a great one, is multitasking. Now, multitasking is awesome to try and develop kids' high-level coordination. So when you multitask, they might be doing one activity, but then you've got to add in another activity they've got to perform concurrently. So a really good one, say for example, is basketball dribbling and then having to perform catches with a tennis ball at the other hand. All right, what they start to be able to do is start to do one activity or one skill on autopilot or automatically while they attend to something else at the same time. And there's lots of different ways you can do that. You can basketball dribbling and kicking, you can do some kicking and catching drills. So they're having to also coordinate their whole body in relation to the tasks that they're doing, and it's also great for up here. The other thing we can do is add constraints. So a kid may be able to do an activity a certain way, but then you can add a constraint to make it more difficult. So now, for example, they're performing a catching activity and they've got to only be able to perform the catches with the left hand. So if you've got, say, a 9-year-old and they can catch fine with their dominant hand in one hand, say the tennis ball, then they might have to say, okay, same activity where they've got to then be moving through, cones or jumping or whatever, and they can only do it with their left hand. Or you could do left and right foot. Or you can say, if I do this, you've got to then catch on the left hand. All right, anytime I do this, you have to catch on the left hand. So it's adding a constraint, all right, and that then also builds us on to increasing the perception and decision-making requirements, our number 5. So we've gone through manipulating variables, number 1, combinations of skills or skill combinations, number 2, multitasking, all right, or sometimes known as just dual tasking when it's only 2, adding constraints, and we've got number 5, increasing perception and decision-making requirements. So this would be something like, if I move this way when I'm throwing the ball to you, say I step to the right, it means you have to catch with your left hand. And if I step with the other foot, you've got to catch with the other hand. Or if I move back, you have to come forwards and catch the ball before it bounces, before it hits the top of the bounce. So there's lots of different ways you can move yourself, and then that means they have to then make a decision based on what you've done. And that really gets them having to look and see what's happening and then make a quick decision and apply their motor skill based on what decision they've made. They're really fun activities, and it takes a little bit of activity design, but they're really awesome, and you can make things increasingly difficult and increasingly difficult for the kids to have to adapt to, and they're real cognitive challenges. All right, and I know as coaches, we probably all wish that some of our kids would actually just apply the cognitive side of things a lot more to when they're practicing. So this is a great way to once again build up here. So we've spoken about, first of all, the current kind of sports development process, and then how we can possibly add something in here that can make a really big difference, and then also about how we can design and provide these activities that can help us develop our athletes in terms of the traits we want them to have. So let's actually consider then what's actually happening in the brain when we do this. What are we trying to affect? So obviously the brain is our master controller of everything. All right, it's sending out all the impulses that control every little bit of understanding that we get from our environment or our visual environment, and every single bit of motor action we perform. So this is our brain. The brain is made up of neurons or brain cells. All right, it has axons that come off it. All right, axons here. We have dendrites here, and you can see that this axon coming off this brain cell connects with this dendrite, and that is what we call a synapse. When we make all these synapses come in together, we get a brain pathway, and we can see our brain pathway starting to form. So that's the kind of underlying brain anatomy. So let's consider how this stuff changes when kids are having experiences, or how does their brain develop so that they can effectively become more skillful. So in response to experiences, these brain cells divide. So it becomes more brain cells designated to a certain action or a certain understanding of visual information. The other thing that happens is that more brain cells start to get designated to certain actions or understandings. We get more connections being made. So there's more of these axons extending out to these dendrites to connect. And these connections effectively become stronger and faster. So that's what's happening anytime someone's becoming more efficient. So if someone's becoming more skillful, all right, there's more of these cells being designated, there's more of these axons and dendrites, these things that go off the cells connecting to each other to form synapses, so we get way more synapses, and then these connections are becoming more stronger, faster, more efficient. So, if we think about what we're trying to do with these types of advanced skill building and coordination activities, if we have a look here, there's two things I want to talk to you about. There's complexity. Now complexity, let's just think about, say, the motor cortex. All right, so here, the part that's controlling motor actions. So complexity relates to an area of the brain. How many cells and how many connections are there? All right, so we've got here a cell, there's its connection, making a synapse to each other. But then imagine someone's becoming way more skillful. This is what it starts to look like. More cells, more connections everywhere. All right, and that's what we refer to as complexity. So if we then are giving kids these types of advanced skill building and different challenges, effectively what we're trying to do is get all these different connections happening in all these different directions, all these different cells connecting in all these different ways. So if we're giving kids just sport-specific skills, then we might just get them lining up and not going in all these different directions as we expect. Okay, so let's then consider integration, and we'll come back to that as well. When we think about integration refers to how different brain areas are connected to one another. So this is just an example, and this is the simplified version because it gets way more complicated than this part of the brain just connecting to this part of the brain. There's all the emotional parts of the brain they've got to have, and the parts that store memory, they all have impacts as well, but we're simplifying it. So we've got here, kind of the part that receives the visual information, and here, your motor cortex. And you can see the connections running between them. All right, so that means this part of the brain and this part of the brain are becoming integrated and they can work together. So the more we can get those connections going in all different ways, then the better. The more we can get that happening in young kids, the better. If we get it happening, that integration happening, or that complexity happening limited, all right, or not as kind of extensive, then there's less options for all the different nerve impulses to run effectively. So effectively, we want the brain areas to become more well connected, and that means they can communicate much more efficiently. So if we have, say, for example, someone who is playing a sport, let's pick, say, cricket, for example, and the ball can be bowled in any different spot, any different spin, pace. We want that batter to be able to, every single time, be able to adjust in a different way their skills every single ball. So the more we have all these, the brain, complex and integrated, the more options, the more different ways the brain can communicate and deliver impulses to meet exactly what challenge or skill challenge they're facing. So what we end up with over time is brain areas that are more able to quickly and effectively communicate, to read and adapt to varying situations. And ultimately that's what we want our kids, if we go back to what we thought about at the start, we want our kids being able to adapt and read situations and quickly adjust what they have to do in that situation to have a successful outcome. So we've just spoken about how the brain's developing in response to all these advanced skills and coordination building activities. And this is going to be very much related to the 6 reasons now that I give you of why we need to put more of these advanced skill building and coordination activities into our sports development programs. All right? So, and they're very much related to more the behavioural and skill outcomes of these activities. So first of all, we build a better base to work from for these kids to attain their sport-specific skills. So the better base refers to more complex brain structures and more integrated brain structures. So there's more options, more viable options for kids to adapt and how they learn. All right, so you've got a better base to work with. All right, and I'm sure all coaches agree that the more generally coordinated our kids are, how much easier it is to coach them. All right, and that leads on to the easier acquisition of skills. And I'm sure every coach will agree is that when we get these kids, some kids we get and they're just so incredibly coordinated, all right, and they learn so much easier. All right, and they might be able to then go out and play any sport, and they'll be able to learn and play that sport very, very easily. So they actually acquire their skills a lot more quickly. So by including even from the age of, say, 7 years and on, and by having them doing all these different activities, even if it's not just this in the sport that they do, they actually end up acquiring their sport-specific skills far more easily. And the more easily they acquire it, the less over-coaching you have to do. And that's something that, there's a lot of coaches out there agreeing that we end up over-coaching, particularly maybe kids who aren't as maybe coordinated as we hoped. You have to give them less explicit instructions all the time. They learn implicitly, so they learn by themselves a lot more. All right, so they also have a higher end potential. So I'll use the example of, and anyone who's been coaching for a while, you've probably got that athlete there that you thought maybe was going to be quite good, had some good attributes, but they maybe stopped getting better. And I can certainly think of those examples. And effectively, they can't really adapt, they can't continue to learn, and they just maybe don't have enough underlying coordination and skills there. So we avoid skill plateaus. And then I'll flip it and you think of those kids that can kind of play and do any sport, and maybe they did a little bit less of one sport in particular when they were younger, but they start really getting into a sport and they just keep learning, keep getting better. They've just got this incredible ability to kind of continue to learn and adapt themselves. And that's ultimately what we want to try and build. The other thing is that in sport, and we talk so much about it as coaches and to the kids, is that how important it is for them to concentrate and focus on what they need to focus on to get better. But I think what we can all do a better job of is to actually give them the experiences that allow them to develop those skills at a young age. And the reason I think these advanced skill building and coordination activities are so important is that straight away they challenge the kids to have to concentrate and really pay attention, because it's a new challenge, they haven't done it before, and try and learn how to do it and get a successful outcome. And naturally you're actually building their attention skills without them having to you having to talk to them about, come on, you've got to concentrate, you've got to focus a little harder there. You're actually stimulating that process happening a lot more naturally. And the younger the kids are, the harder it is to talk to them about having to concentrate. So developing these experiences or providing these experiences for them to attain those skills more implicitly. Okay, the next one is, I think you're really helping to develop a mindset, where we want our kids or our young athletes to be able to go out there in competition and to adapt to what's happening. So they're faced with a challenge. They may not have been very comfortable doing it in the initial stages, but we want them to adapt and problem solve and try and learn and adjust in the situation to try and find an outcome and solve problems. So providing young kids with these activities that require them to adapt and adjust all the time, you're building this mindset for when they do play and compete in sport that anything could happen. I have to adjust and learn, and that's just in their psyche. And the last thing is fun and motivation. Now, we all know is that some kids lose motivation at certain ages. And in my experience, I know, talking to a lot of other coaches, often it's when some kids have been kind of maybe forced to do too much of just one thing and they're not stimulated in their training environment enough. So by doing lots of these advanced kind of skill building coordination activities, you're keeping things really fun. They're coming to practice, coming to training. coming to their sport sampling experiences, not really knowing what to expect. It's new, it's exciting, they have to adapt, there's a new challenge. So it's fun, it's engaging, and they're enjoying their early experiences in sport a lot more. And that, once again, builds their psyche, builds their mindset, so that they develop a real love of the sport in general, but also the sport that they might pursue more so. All right, so the 6 reasons, and I think there's 6 pretty good reasons. So now we have to think about when can we include these types of activities. All right, so we're obviously we're still going to spend the majority of our time when we're developing athletes in their sport-specific skills. But how can we and when can we find the time to do these activities? So first of all, these types of activities are awesome just for warm-ups. So the reason I love them for warm-ups is that it gets the kids really mentally engaged before their session as well. It gets a real energy and a real enthusiasm going, especially if they haven't done some of the activities before. All right, so warm-ups are a great time. And warm-ups it also serves a double purpose. You're getting the things you want out of a warm-up as well. You're getting their body to warm up, their body temp. All right, you're getting some range of movement, exercise, work done, but you're also getting them mentally engaged. So warm-up is an awesome time to put these in. The other time is that I'm a really big fan of just throwing them in randomly into a sport-specific skill session. And that's also building the mindset of kids. Just, hey, anything could happen. Let's adapt to it. Let's adjust your body, adjust your mind, and figure out a way to perform these skills. So just throwing them randomly in. So you might have, let's use tennis as an example this time. All right, you might be working on something to do with their forehand, and all of a sudden you switch them off from that, and you get them to adjust and do something that involves kicking and catching, a dual tasking activity. Or you might get them to a skill combination where they've got to hop over some hurdles, take off, catch a ball before it bounces twice, and then kick the ball at an angle to the goal, and then get them back to work into the forehand again. Well, it keeps sessions or sport-specific skill sessions really fun and lively as well. All right. So the other time you can do it is integrated into physical development sessions. So kids might start doing their physical development work. Building their core stability, building all their hip strength, shoulder strength. Maybe around starting age 9, 10, where they're doing really basic kind of more body weight stuff. So you can actually integrate these types of activities in really well to that. So I'll give you an example. You could do some lateral hopping work, which will develop their single leg control and stability with some catching at the same time. So you're getting the physical stuff done, as well as you spending that time building their skills and adaptability. So integrating it, especially for the really young kids, into their physical development sessions is a really, really easy way to do it. 2 other times that I think where we can actually try and get these kids to engage in these types of activities that challenge their skill sets and their coordination is physical education classes at school. If PE teachers or even normal teachers, they're having some outside time, they're really quite easy to set up. And then if you can get those times can become more of a skill building time, then it'll help kids out a lot. And then also parents. Parents can do these activities really easily. So you might have a kid who's a soccer player who's 10 years old, but their dad could go out and do some skill building coordination activities on the weekend or after school when they don't have soccer. All right, it's fun, it's something different rather than just doing soccer, and then it's building that overall body coordination and awareness and body awareness. All right, so there's 5 different examples of when you can include these activities. And just imagine if you had a 7-year-old who went through the normal sports development process and had all these moments where they're doing these increasingly difficult coordination drills. Imagine what difference it would make to their body awareness and coordination by the time they were 15, and maybe they were really taking a sport more seriously, and they've got that accelerated ability to learn, adapt. They're not stale from just doing one sport the whole time as well. So there you go, 5. So to finish up, I'm putting out the challenge. All right, we're getting out of our comfort zone. Now I've coached for a long time, and sometimes we can have that little tendency possibly to go out there and maybe coach on a little bit of autopilot and do what we've always done. But trying to include these types of activities in these times can really help you kind of get out of the comfort zone. All right, it takes a little extra planning, a little extra thought, but I think it's a real area where we can give the kids we work with, or young athletes, developing athletes, a real edge in terms of how they can then compete and adapt and apply themselves to the learning in a sport that they may choose to really pursue. All right, and that's, I think, that the biggest thing is this gives them the ability to have some long-term success. And why I say that is that sometimes we get caught up with how good kids are at young ages in sport, but very often it's the kids who may be really good at young ages don't actually end up necessarily the best for whatever reasons. And I think that doing lots of these types of activities that we've spoken about today, and I've given you heaps of reasons why, right from the 6 reasons we had in terms of their behaviour and skill outcomes, how their brain's developing. So as to why it can help them have long-term success in their sport. So there's increased fun and motivation, you avoid those skill plateaus and all the other things that we spoke about. So go on, that's the challenge, get out there. Kids from that age of 7 and above, all right, start trying to really design and develop those activities using these 5 things to get some young kids seriously skillful and have that really heightened ability to learn. So thanks for being with us for our advanced skill building coordination activities video. Don't forget, jump on skillforkids.com. So much reading, so much watching. You can find heaps and heaps of these skill building coordination activities in the skills and coordination sections, in the advanced skills and coordination sections on the website. So you can make up your own, but there's also tons on the website for you to find as well. All right, thanks for watching.
skillforkids.com